It's lovely to have you with us.
Thanks for having me.
And hopefully we all will enjoy the session. So just before we do start, I just wanted to highlight that we do have the section of the questions. So if you have any questions, I will be reading them. And if there will be any suitable time, I will interrupt Greg and we will put the questions in the middle. Otherwise, all the questions we will try to answer in the end after the presentation. If you want to just have a major comment or just chat, use the chat, but those questions in the chat will not be answered officially. So if you prefer anything to be answered by Greg, please do use the question section. And also once we are in the Q&A, I will allow you to talk. So if somebody is interested to have the dialogue with Greg, we will utilize that section after his presentations. So we are up to right now around 37 people. So I think, Greg, if you want to go ahead, it's all yours. And thank you so much for being with us tonight.
Well, thank you very much for having me. So I've entitled this Rethinking InfoSec. It's a slightly modified version of a presentation I've done a few times. So I'll just go right into, I'm assuming everyone can see my screen, but I'll go right into slide number 2. Who am I? Can't tell I'm a Unix fan. So my name is Greg van der Gaast. I've been doing this cyber or information security thing for about 22 years now. I started out as a teenage hacker in a group called Millworm, which a few years ago was ranked as one of the most infamous hacker groups / collectives out there, along with Anonymous and Kevin Mitnick. I'm actually mentioned in one of Kevin Mitnick's books a few times, but he still won't accept my LinkedIn invitation. Who knows? After that, some nice gentlemen from the Defense Department came to my house. They were then accompanied by some other gentlemen from the FBI, and they offered me they made me a job offer I couldn't refuse. They were very adamant about the not refusing part. So I spent about 3 years, well, I'll rewind a bit. So I was part of this group called Millworm. We probably hacked a couple hundred sites in our time. The really big one was a country's nuclear weapons installation, and that was a few weeks after they set off 5 atomic bombs. So it was quite a big deal, hence the attention from the government. So I ended up spending about 3 years, just shy of 3 years, working with the FBI and the Defense Department in a variety of covert functions, a little bit of offensive work, a lot of investigative work, and I would probably see, on top of the 200 or so breaches I'd been involved with previously, probably saw about another 300 breaches. So I've seen, like, firsthand close to about 500 breaches, which is where a lot of my thinking comes from. After this, I went on to do some more architecture role. I worked as the security lead for CGI's architecture department. CGI is Canada's largest managed service provider. I'm Canadian, by the way. I was a contractor for a number of things. I devised in-theater security for NATO, for Kosovo and Afghanistan, for their mobile tactical networks. And one of the things that came out of seeing so many breaches was the fact that a lot of these places, they had information security programs, they had NIST certification, they had ISO certification, and it didn't stop them from being breached. And I'm a high school dropout, so I learned all this stuff myself. And when these standards were coming out, ISO and NIST, the 800 and all this stuff, or at least when they were coming to my attention, because a lot of them predated me, they were just kind of coming to my consciousness, I never quite understood them. I could never quite see the mapping of, okay, I know how these things work. I know how to break into systems. I know how to make sure that other people can't break into my systems. So I know how to secure systems. But I didn't see how these standards actually helped that in any way, because they seemed very kind of airy and generic, and they didn't really get down to the nitty-gritty of the actual technology on the ground. So I started focusing on doing really clean sheet InfoSec programs, where I was like, I'm not going to care about any of those. I'm actually going to look at the exact organization that I had in front of me, those exact systems, those exact processes. What do we do specifically? And create an ensemble of security solutions and processes and a framework that ties it all together and the right technologies that secures that. And then map that to whether it be NIST, ISO, SOC 2, whatever, for compliance reasons. You can do that quite easily, but then you actually have tailor-made security for the organization. And that's what I've kind of become famous for. I'm currently the head of information security for the University of Salford. So I'm in charge of essentially the CISO there. I've built the team, I've built the whole capability. I also have my own company called CMCG, where I do some security advisory. Some of that is legal portfolio work, so I do like M&A assessments for acquisitions. I do assessments quite often. When law firms or other companies through their law firms want to demonstrate negligence, when there are breaches or when there are cyber insurance claims, that kind of thing. And it's never taken me until lunchtime on the first day to show negligence in an organization, despite them being ISO 27001 certified by the Big Four for years. Another thing I do is contracts review, because I've never seen an information security services contract that could hold water. And I'm a really, really big evangelist of information security leadership and proactivity, and not just doing the kind of status quo dogma that the industry tells us to do. I like to guest lecture at the university to give back. I also have an information security leadership course that's given by the university, by cybersecurity professionals, by Sapphire, a few places. I've recently published a book called Rethinking InfoSec, which funny enough is the title of this slide. And as I was saying before, I'm a witness to many, many breaches, which is what has shaped my thinking a lot. So I like to get people thinking, so I like to use controversial subjects. So I've got two graphs here, and one of these graphs is the gun ownership rate per capita and the murder rate per capita in the United States. And I'm quite used to speaking in front of public audiences, and you usually get a chuckle here because there's a clear correlation between these two, right? And then I tell people, yeah, but it's the thing you have to understand, and why this isn't going away, is the emotional investment, the indoctrination of, you can tell people, give people all these numbers of it, look how many people are dying, blah, blah, blah. And someone will always come up with the anecdote of, yeah, but my uncle back in '67 chased away this burglar, so it works. And no matter, they become so emotionally involved in it that no matter how many facts and how many numbers you show them, they can't move away from that. Now, the other graph is information security spending, or rather investment, and the impact of breaches, so costs multiplied by frequency of breaches. Now, which is, if you're in information security, is our job. It's our job to do that. What always surprises people is when I tell them that the gun ownership and murder rate is the graph on the right, and the InfoSec spending and cost of breaches is the one on the left. So it turns out, despite everything the media wants us to say, statistically, if you look at the whole picture, guns are actually a really good deterrent, because most criminals don't like getting shot. And most people don't run around shooting people at random. So it's enough to offset things in a positive favor. But it's not politically correct. And a lot of people are indoctrinated to think that very, very differently. And when I give this in front of an audience, I can already see people thinking in their heads, trying to come up with arguments to counter what I'm saying, because it's making them uncomfortable. And that's the point I like to illustrate with this slide, is that we have to be quite critical in our thinking, because sometimes we have to face reality and it can make us uncomfortable. So back to the one on the left, why is it that we're spending more and more money on information security and the amount of breaches and losses is only increasing? So I have a couple of analogies. I like analogies, by the way. Storytelling is fantastic for engagement. If you're not good at storytelling, there's some great courses on LinkedIn. One of my analogies, my favorite analogies, is the junction box, the electrical, whatever you call it in the UK, where all your power comes in and you get your fuses and your breakers. Now imagine your junction box, electrical junction box, blows up. What do? Well, you call an electrician. The electrician comes, he or she rebuilds the box for you, and then he leaves. You pay him and he leaves. And then imagine a week later it blows up again. Well, you call the electrician again. The electrician comes in, rebuilds it again, gives you a bill, leaves. A week later it blows up again. Well, this time the electrician comes and he sells you a bigger one, a more robust one. Costs twice as much. But you know what? It lasts for 2 weeks before it blows up. Electrician comes in again, charges you even more money, but this time he gives you one that's 4 times the size and lasts 2 months. Now this cycle keeps repeating itself until you've got a junction box that costs you an absolute fortune, takes up half your kitchen wall, but only blows up every couple of years. Then someone comes along who's not an electrician, And he's just kind of objectively noticing that you have a very, very large electrical junction box in your kitchen. And then he asks the question of, how long has that water pipe up there been leaking on top of it? And this is the analogy I came up with to explain to someone in information security who is absolutely adamant that things like asset management and patching were not our job, that we shouldn't get involved in that. We create a policy and we leave it to them. And my problem is those things are the root cause of 95% easily of security incidents. And yet we don't want to get involved in them. We're not being proactive. We're not going for things upstream. And this is a really, really big issue. And my other analogy is quite similar, but it illustrates just how far the information security industry has come in this. Give me a second. Imagine you're standing on the street and you're in front of you, you have a car factory. And to your right, there's this big building, the factory itself. And to the left, there's a giant parking lot where all the finished cars go. Now, imagine, parts go in, sheet metal goes in, it gets stamped into body shells, they get painted, parts get bolted on, it goes through the whole assembly line, and you have a finished car. And then they push it into the parking lot, but they push it from the 3rd floor. So the car crashes into the parking lot, into crumple heap. The people in the parking lot are, oh my God, quick, move it out of the way because there's more and more coming. And then they're like, quick, get us 100 more people because we need to fix all these cars that are crashing into the parking lot now. And they start assessing, well, what's broken, what's wrong with it, what pieces do we need, what's the procedure for changing that piece, what tooling do we need, and then we start stepping all over each other. And well, let's build some workstations, let's build some tents. Let's prioritize the activities. Let's work how they figure out how we can best do this. We're stepping all over each other, so let's create a workflow. Let's get more and more people. Let's create a quality management standard so that we can do this in an organized, ISO certified way. Let's bring in the auditors to make sure that we're compliant to that. Let's ask some vendors to give us better tools and better solutions so we can do this faster and faster. And next thing you know, we need to hire 1,000 more people. There's a skills gap to fix all these cars, right? Meanwhile, if you're standing on the street, you're just wondering, why the hell don't they just make the cars come out the ground floor so they're not all smashed up like this? And if you ask someone in that parking lot, they won't be able to tell you. They'll be heavily indoctrinated because this is now their livelihood to fix all these broken cars. They're not really interested in fixing the assembly line anymore. And this is the kind of devolution that I see, the de-evolution I see in the security industry of the last 20 years, because we used to be a system administrator owned his system and secured his system, and that's all the security you had. So some of the, these are real numbers. I don't have the legend on the chart here, but these are numbers from Government Accounting Agency, Homeland Security, FBI, and a few other quite reliable sources, obviously in the US. And in blue is how much we're investing in spending in security, and in yellow is the cost of breaches, the actual losses. So not only, if our spending is fighting what we're fighting against, well, we should be seeing a corresponding decrease, but there is no corresponding decrease. It's only getting worse and worse and worse. And the spending in terms of, not just in absolute terms, but also in terms of percentage of IT budgets and total company budgets is going up and up and up, which is not sustainable. So we're spending more and more. We're spending more and more percentage-wise, and yet what we're fighting against is running away from us. And we see all these security pains, right? So there's so much complexity. We need AI, we need automation, we need SOAR, and there's security costs, and the budgets need to go up. And we have the supposed 4,070,000, which is the number I got from ISC squared, information security skills gap. And yet the breaches keep growing. But if you look at our approach, it's incredibly reactive. We're not getting ahead of the curve anywhere. We're not stopping those cars from crashing into the parking lot. And I was giving a keynote in UK ESRM last November, and after me I had a lady from IC Squared. That's where I got the number for the skills gap from. She had a fantastic slide. I was never able to get that deck. She had a fantastic slide that showed the top 20 security roles that are most in demand, that have the biggest gap in demand, and how big the percentage was and how big it was going to get in a few years' time. And I forget the exact number, but let's say there were about 15 roles. Every single one was a reactive role. Every single one was forensics or assessing or SOC analyst, that kind of thing. Nowhere, there was not a single role in there that involved fixing IT process, business engagement, any of those things. It just doesn't exist. So what we call our security pain, go on.
Sorry, Greg, just to disturb you in here, I'm just having a thought in here. Would you think that it is a problem of not knowing, like it's not knowing unknown, because people do not know what to proactively kind of measure or prevent, because the dynamics of cyber is really much progressive, and you just do not know what you can actually put in? Or how would you answer that? Because I'm just thinking reactive is based on what you know, but active is where you do not know, and you do not know where the malicious activities will come from. Like it's nearly like you can never be ready.
Yes, and you've actually perfectly illustrated the security scope of thinking, because and I'll actually get to this later. So I'll continue, but I'll highlight your question here, right? So basically, we consider this our security pains, but for me, it's almost a security comfort zone. This is where we're used to being, and it kind of excuses a lot of what's happening, because it's so difficult, it's so hard, it's so out of control. No wonder we're failing. It's not our fault. Give us more resource. But if you look at the real root causes, so the vast majority of large data breaches and GDPR fines, they're due to oversights. It's everyone that gets breached is it's an advanced, advanced threat or advanced nation state threat. It's like just because some 14-year-old in China, hacked or exploited your system that had a 6-year-old missing critical patch on it, doesn't make it a sophisticated advanced nation state threat. We get British Airways, Marriott, Equifax, Capital One, Travelex. All of these were simple patching. They were architectural standards. They were, I think in Equifax's case, it wasn't patching because they didn't know about a machine. That's why it didn't get patched. I was like, well, okay, well then it's an asset management issue. They're very, very simple things. And these are, back to the junction box example. These are quite often IT functions that security doesn't get heavily involved in. IT just does to the level that to the extent that they need to for the functional requirement. My servers are up, they're delivering the service, I'm happy with that. They're not concerned about the integrity of all of the other things. But there's nothing saying we can't know that these systems exist. There's nothing saying we can't patch systems. We've somehow accepted not doing all these things. And there's a great saying by Sun Tzu. It's, I'm sure you've probably heard it. It's, know thy enemy, know thyself, 1,000 battles, 1,000 victories. We are so focused on the enemy that we've completely forgotten about thyself. We have full control of our systems, or you should be, and you should be striving to have it. There's nothing stopping us from discovering everything we have. There's nothing stopping us from configuring everything we have, from maintaining everything we have, from patching everything we have. We fail at it terribly, and we keep putting in more and more reactive security capability in place to make up for that failure. It's actually a very different set of skills that's required. And the interesting thing is they're much more simple. They're much more common sense. If I go to my car factory example, if I get a 10-year veteran CISSP, I put him down on the ground, he's going to run into the parking lot, start changing body panels on broken cars. But if I get a 20-year-old kid fresh out of school, he's going to look at the factory and say, why the hell are they lobbing cars from the 3rd floor? And he's just going to look at why that's happening and figure it out and fix it. And then those 1,000 people in the parking lot are going to be out of work. So what were they missing? Quite simply, care and engagement to find out what's going on. One of these companies, I spoke to the investigators. They were investigating the parent company's network. And at one point, they asked them, what's connected to this switch? And the company didn't know. Or the security team didn't know. It turned out to be, and people think I'm going to say a wireless access point or a Raspberry Pi or something like that. No, it was an entire company they acquired 6 years before with about 800 endpoints. Security team hadn't really bothered to ask about it, and it had been sitting there for years with no ADR, no monitoring, no nothing. And obviously the attackers had a field day on it, completely undetected. So how did we get here? So we're heavily focused on our technical tools. We're very disengaged from people and business. We also have this kind of almost a tunnel vision of how we should do things. We have a security industry dogma, and some of this stuff is very, very cool. 0 day, they're very, very cool. But a perfect example I give all the time is if I tell people, I'm not too concerned about 0 days, people lose their freaking mind. But the fact is 75% of their servers are missing several critical patches, and they don't seem too concerned about that. Whereas that is far more likely to get you breached than a 0 day. Industry indoctrination and standardization. I see this really, really big push to standardize how we operate. But how we operate doesn't work very well. So is this really what we want to be standardizing? Instead of fitting a holistic approach of how do I secure this, when you go secure a house, you look at the house. You look at how big of a lock you get, or what kind of door, or what window, or what protection measure. It depends on where's the house located. How easily could someone even access this door or this window? If it's on the 3rd floor, I don't need massive bolts on it. If it's on the ground floor in a really bad neighborhood and there's nothing else and there's no gate, yeah. So that better fitted holistic approach makes much, much more sense. And we've standardized that thinking out of the process. So many organizations, they go and they download NIST, they download ISO, and they start ticking the boxes to meet those controls without ever looking at what their actual business is doing and what matters there. Personally, I go through the org chart. I look at what is your job, what systems do you use, what data do you process, how does it handle? And then I start making sure there are controls and security measures around all of those. And not security layered on, but if I see your systems are built very poorly, I'm going to address the system build process, not additional layers of security, which won't be needed if the systems are built securely in the first place. We tend to have, because we're techie, tend to not be very good with people. Now, I've been doing this for 22 years, and it's only the last few years I've gotten good at this. We're unable to influence and engage. It's shockingly bad. You hear security people complain about this all the time. They don't listen to us, they don't care, they don't understand. CISOs, I need to report to the board. And quite frankly, if you feel you need to report to the board, which you're probably right, to be honest, but if you're able to report to the board, you will report to the board. They will, as soon as you start saying things that are business relevant, you will get snapped up to report to the board faster than you can say hello. So we complain a lot about this, but we do very little about it. We don't engage. Org charts mean nothing. You can engage anyone you want on a human level. For example, university, when I started, there was no security organization. There was no traction, there was no budget, there was nothing. And one of the first things I did was I went to our chief executive's annual address. She gave her address. Everyone said, thank God, fled the auditorium. I walked down to the stage, made her a couple compliments on her speech. And next thing I know, I'm having a cup of coffee. So you can absolutely engage. What I like to do whenever I'm doing this in person at a conference, I would pick a random person in the audience, say, sorry, what's your name? Kevin. Kevin, I like your watch. Kevin, after this talk, can I buy you a cup of coffee? I'd like to tell you something. No one has ever said no. It's all you need to do. Don't be shy about engaging. Other problem we have is increasing complexity. So everything is getting incredibly complex because it just increases exponentially when you start trying to detect and respond to everything. Because again, you can't anticipate all these unknowns. But if you actually secure the systems in the first place so that they are not susceptible to attacks, you no longer have to anticipate most of those attacks. So it simplifies things greatly. And metrics in information security. Now, metrics are great, clicks to sales conversion, in sales, or even in, how many hits can I take on my website versus, CPU load, memory load, that kind of stuff. Those are hard metrics. Security is completely arbitrary. We're guessing. We have no way of knowing what's going on, what's going to hit us. So metrics are all but useless. And I was talking to the co-founder of a very large, £5 billion value company here. And I was like, look, the only metric that matters to me, so he was the co-founder and CFO of this very large group. And I told him, the only thing that matters to me in terms of metrics, score from 1 to 10, and you give me the metric. Score from 1 to 10, how much do you trust me to handle this job? Because I will come in and I will find 1,000 issues that you didn't know about, and then we'll start offering solutions to all of them, and then we'll fix things. And that will make you feel at ease because you have the right people that are finding the issues and they're fixing the issues. That's all that should matter. Massaging numbers out of other arbitrary numbers, other arbitrary numbers with random weighings, with no real connection to the outside world, not even accurately knowing what's in your environment, is completely useless. We also have a huge lack of accountability and initiative. I've seen, I mean, a lot of information security organizations are not very proactive. Some of them are downright negligent, and some of them are just full-on bad faith. I've seen some security organizations in large MSPs, they've got budgets in the near 9 figures, and there's just full-on bad faith of covering stuff up and collecting money and billing customers for tons of services that aren't even happening. And then there's the cost effectiveness of it all. I hosted a healthcare conference for the NHS, late last year, I believe. And one of the speakers there was, she was a project manager. She was talking about all their security projects. And she was a very, very competent project manager. But what struck me was all of her projects were building up reactive capability. The NHS was spending something, I forget the number now, but close to £400 million on building up information security, detect and respond capability. But at no point was there any mention of actually building systems better, having better processes, preventing some of these incidents from happening in the first place so you don't need to detect and respond to them. And you could have probably had the same level of assurance for £50 million worth of process and build and other improvements instead of the £400 million of detect and respond. And you get to a point where you just cost the NHS an extra 350 million people. How many lives would that save? How many people have now died because InfoSec spending is out of control? And I think that's something we should take very, very seriously. I'll tell you a story. Now, before my current role, I worked for a different company. So all companies B, C, and I. So B, you'll find out who that is. That was our client. C was my employer. And I was a managed service provider that my employer used. Now, I can't tell you, well, tell you what, I was IBM because they're not actually at fault in anything. C, I can't tell you who it is for various legal reasons, but it rhymes with capita. So Seem Credible is first day on the job, or just about the first day on the job. My responsibility was to manage this client that we had. And we took in about 500 of their servers and company C, and then we handed them out to IBM as part of the managed service group. So one of the questions that came to me is like, well, we're supposed to deliver SIEM services. What exactly is it that we're doing? And no one at company C actually knew. And I thought, well, shouldn't you know? Like what tool are they using? Are the people qualified? What are we logging? What are we correlating? What's the retention? Where's it being stored? What reporting are we getting? Can we, what's the deal? And no one knew. It's like, well, all the servers are with IBM, so IBM does it. So I call up IBM and I asked them, yeah, these SIEM, for these 500 servers, SIEM, like what is it you guys are doing? And I asked them the same question. What's the tool? What's the retention? What are you guys logging, correlating? What are we seeing? All this stuff. And the first reply I get is, well, what do you mean 500 servers? To which I ask, well, what do you mean? What do you mean 500 servers? So it turns out in the contract with IBM, the entire estate, which had 499 servers in it, front ends, back ends, web, databases, application servers, all kinds of stuff. The entire thing was defined as the application. So IBM's interpretation of that in the contract was, well, the web application. So I asked them, so how many of these 500 servers are the web application? And they come back with 18. So all this time we thought we were getting SIEM services on 500 servers. There was actually 18. And then I noticed in the contract, many, many pages away from where SIEM was mentioned, there was a tiny clause that said any system that is end of life, considered end of life by the manufacturer, isn't subject to service. Now this applied to the entire contract, but no one knew it because it was written somewhere like 120 pages later in the contract. So I asked them, of these 18 servers, how many of them are actually end of life and therefore unsupported by you? And they came back with all 18. So I said, so we've been paying you £25,000 per month for the last 3.5 years to monitor absolutely nothing. And they said, yes, that's the contract. And this is what the IBM contract team is the best in the business. Aside from that, every single server and desktop, year-old, like 5-6-year-old critical vulnerabilities. And it was quite interesting because they had an entire call center piece of infrastructure where they took in payment data over the phone, and then that had to go through an API but the API was very poorly coded and required a specific version of, I think, Java, which required a specific version of Internet Explorer, which required a specific version of Windows. So this whole environment of, I think, about 400 desktops was just stuck in time because they couldn't update anything because it wouldn't work because the API was so poorly coded. So they ended up spending about £500,000 in security work to isolate and compartmentalize this whole environment, but they never thought of just recoding the API because that wasn't security's job. So the amount of waste was shocking. You know, their patching processes were really, really poor. The patch tooling was really ineffective. But if something would show as, if they would then do vulnerability scans and say, well, this has this vulnerability, they would say no, because we've patched that. And then they would take that away from the report, even though the scanner was correctly identifying that that hadn't been done. Other things like, you have this vulnerability, and then we say, well, no, because it's not missing that patch. It's like, it's not missing that patch because the OS is 10 years out of end of life. And they would just keep removing all these things from the report. So you had an environment that was completely riddled with holes, but because of the reporting canceling each other out, it would show up as fairly clean. And the very interesting thing is, these people are not evil. They're not trying to cover this up. This is the result of organizations creating silos, not realizing, you know, what the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing. And some people at the top sure know and are taking advantage of this. But these things happen far too often. And there's a real lack of holistic consideration in how information security is done across an enterprise. Now, if you're an MSP and you're milking your client's money, great. But if you're concerned about your own company, that is something to really, really look out for. They had something like 45,000 undocumented firewall rules. But the best part was, when I was reviewing some of these firewall rules requests, I was like, well, you're asking to open up a port for email services, but it says port 9. That doesn't correlate to any email service that I know of. Like, what's going on here? And that's when they told, no. That's the physical port on the firewall. Like, okay, but what about the TCP/IP port? Oh no, we don't track those. Kind of important. You know, they had live data in test environments. They had, you know, DR databases, which are live data because they're there for disaster recovery, you know, without controls and also being used for testing, all kinds of stuff. And yet these places were ISO 27001 certified, PCI certified, CAST certified by KPMG, BSI, all those guys. These people had never caught these things. They're just going through the motions. They're just ticking the boxes. These are the standards. This is why it's so important to look at what's actually going on, because this happens a lot. It's shocking. There's one story about the website where, so they were running a website of a really old version of Apache that was end of life about 2 years. And they got commissioned to update it to a newer version of Apache. Now, they did update it to a newer version of Apache, but still end of life version of Apache, which kind of defied the whole point. And I was like, look, culturally, you have so many problems. I'm just vetoing this because, first of all, it's not going to fix the issues. And I'm sure there's going to be other problems. So this got escalated. I guess there were some golf course discussions among the executives of both parties. And finally, they agreed, okay, we're going to go ahead with this minor upgrade. And we can do the full upgrade that we intended initially at a later time. Caveat, before you go ahead with this minor upgrade, you run a vulnerability scan of the new web server and make sure that there are no new issues. So I was on vacation when this happened. So they did the vulnerability scan and they found no new issues. And so the site went live. So a week later, I came back from vacation to this. You ever gone on vacation, come back and immediately need another vacation? That was this case. So basically, the client, if you haven't figured it out, was a BBC. And all the TV license payments were going out in the clear, or at least all the bank ones. And I was just like, what have you guys done? Because I thought that you guys did a vulnerability scan of this and it checked out. And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, well, this website's not even running HTTPS. What is going on here? At which point I asked to see the configuration, and I found it very strange. I asked to see the report from the vulnerability scan, and I found it very strange that it didn't mention that there was no HTTPS running. Like every vulnerability scanner, this was Qualys, which I'd not used before, but every vulnerability scanner I've ever used was at least reported that. So I found that quite strange. I was like, can I see the configuration files of this web scanner? So it turned out in the scanner there was a parameter somewhere called something like enable web security checks with a little tick box, and no one had ticked that box, and it hadn't been ticked in over 2 years. So they were running vulnerability scans against their web server with all the web security checks disabled, and no one had ever noticed because the job was just run the scanner, and no one looked into it. So yeah, that happens a lot. So how do you make basic security effective? Because most breaches are caused of very, very simple things. The hard part is doing them consistently and holistically, or rather holistically, so throughout the entire organization, not missing anything, and then doing them consistently, so you actually maintain them. So the first thing is fanatical engagement. You've got to want to know absolutely everyone. Everything that goes on, you should know. You'd be shocked by the amount of heads of InfoSec that have been in a place for 5 years and they cannot name you the name of their finance application. That's a core business function. How can you not know the application? Proactivity, altruism, care. Now these are really important because proactivity helps you get ahead of the curve and prevent issues. So if you fix your asset management, you're going to have way fewer issues. If you fix your configuration management, how you deploy stuff, how you do network access control, these are things that really impact the amount of security issues you're going to have. Altruism is something a little bit different. Altruism and care, that's really caring about the information, about the organization rather. And that builds your personal brand. That's going to get you traction to get things done. I cannot understate the importance of that. There's a reason I do guest lectures. There's a reason I contribute to, I go out every single time that someone approaches me and I've not heard from them before at the university. And we have dozens and dozens and dozens of research centers and classes, all kinds of stuff, and industry collaboration projects. I go out there and they're expecting to get a no from me. And I'm like, no, I'm not going to say no. Can I meet you for a cup of coffee? Because I'm very curious what you do. And just a lot of them initially have a lot of reluctance to speak to security. And next thing you know, it's like, holy cow, security is the only person from IT that's actually come down to talk to us. And they're really cool and they're really interested. They're actually going to go out of their way to help us. So that builds you eyes and ears and even hands in some cases throughout the organization. And that makes a huge, huge difference in what you see, what you become aware of, but also your ability to influence people. Like if you help people out, they will help you out in return. They won't be hard asses because they actually know who you are. Like tailored and sustainable frameworks and programs address your business. Address your business. And the next point is pretty much the same. You've got to know what matters to your business. And you've got, like, one of the very first things I do, speaking to integration, is so many security people are always fighting against the tide. The very first thing I do is I'll create a framework. I want all my policies and procedures structured within a framework so they're not loose in drawers all over the place. They have a placeholder. They sit on this, chicken wire grid. But on top of that is a framework overview. There's continuous improvements. There's how we're going to structure things or how we update things. And on top of that, there's an executive layer of an executive charter, information security charter. That's going to go to the board. I don't care if it takes you a year to get it to the board. Get it to the board. Get the board to sign off that you have involvement in procurement. You have involvement in projects. You have right to audit. You have the right for direct visibility. You don't have to, anything you want to see, you're allowed to see firsthand. I have always 10 or 12 directives, depending on the organization, what I feel is going to be difficult, things like I'm going to experience resistance and need to overcome. Common sense statements, but get them signed off by the board. And that starts making your mandate a lot easier. Seek out root causes as far as possible. I cannot understate the importance of this. If I see that I have a security incident and it's because something got, a system got breached. Well, why did it get breached? Well, it got breached because it was missing that patch. Okay, well, clean up the system, reimage the box, fix that patch. Great, that's what most people do. Why was the patch missing? Why was the patch missing? Did the patch tool not work? Is something wrong with the patching schedule? Did the job not run? Was it reported as done, but it wasn't actually done? Was there a business objection to it not being done, and why was that? Is our patch tool just not very good? Well, if it's not very good, why did we select it? What's wrong with our what was wrong with our procurement process? What was wrong with our proof of concept? Why didn't we test the scenario? Start fixing those problems, and then that kind of problem will disappear altogether. The best part is if you get if you take one problem and keep pulling on the string of its root cause, you're eventually going to get, and just keep going. Simon Sinek, ask why. Go why. Eventually, you're going to get to what's pretty much a root cause or very close to it. If you fix that, that issue is not going to happen anymore. But you've got about 100 or 1,000 other issues that you'll have resolved in the same suite. The best part is you probably have another 1,000 issues that you're not even aware of because you have no visibility or you haven't even thought of them that you're resolving as well. Because there's that tree of issues where things keep branching out and branching out and branching out. If you address the top thing, you're not just addressing that one issue that you started tracing from, you're addressing all of these and a whole bunch more you didn't even know about. And do valuable. Stop spending money on security tooling for security tooling's sake. You've got to have like real business value. I'm just going to speed it up a bit. I want to talk about culture. Culture is a very interesting thing. When I say culture in information security circles, everyone thinks user awareness, that kind of stuff. No, culture is something very, very different. Culture is people doing the right thing for the right reasons because they want to. And something I see very often is things like maturity assessment. Now, I saw one of these fairly recently, and this is actually a picture I saw with some bars. It has nothing to do with a maturity assessment, but it looked very much like this. There were about 10 or 20 areas, and there was a maturity score associated to each of them. Now, these guys had, 2s, 3s, 4, 5s, and then they had like a couple of 10s. And this tells the company, oh, look, we're doing very, very well in these areas. These areas need some work. And I'm like, and their average score was something like, in this graph, it would be about 5, 5, 6. And I'm like, no, your average score is maybe 1.5. And they look at me like, well, what do you mean? There is simply no way that culturally, that an organization that has a culture that does a 1 out of 10 in an area will do a 10 out of 10 in another area, and vice versa. You're either doing a good job or you're not, which tells me whoever did the assessment missed something when he gave that the 10. And if he missed something when he gave you the 10, he or she probably missed something when he gave you the 2 or 3. So those were probably 1s as well. And more often than not, when I see an assessment like that, and I break it down to you are no higher than your lowest score, sure enough, you'd be shocked. I've seen the last place I looked at, they got a 10 out of 10 for backups and restore. A year later, I'd still not actually been able to see any proof of a successful backup and restore in the flesh. There was lots of paperwork, but no one could actually demonstrate the working process when you were standing in front of it. So that's an interesting one to look out for. It's a good piece of insight. I want to talk about accreditations. I'm going to talk about people in a second. Can you spot the better driver? Is it the F1 driver or is it the guy who got his Chrysler on the roof? Well, the F1 driver is Max Verstappen, who's too young to have a driver's license in this picture. Meanwhile, the other person on the right has their driver's license. But the way we do hiring would favor the guy who drove his car on the roof. I put this slide in because a friend of mine, Mike Jones, who's actually from Anonymous, someone wouldn't hire him to do pen testing because they said he wasn't CREST certified. I'm like, he would run circles around most CREST people. So this is something I really want to tell people about. And I'm going to speed it up a bit. Teams. I want to talk about building teams because we're talking about this massive skills shortage, and yet there are thousands of extremely talented people out there. My LinkedIn network is fairly big, and every day, and some of these people have been without work for like 6+ months. Really, really good people, and they cannot find work because it's absurd what they're going through. I hire on attitude and aptitude. Are they motivated? Can they do the job? And I'm not asking if they're qualified to do the job today. Can they be taught to do the job? That's all I care about. Trust in human potential. A lot of people also, a junior role, they give them a junior task. I don't give them a junior task. I break down a very senior complex task and give it to them one piece at a time until they've done all the pieces. They then know how to do that whole task. And within 3 months, I've got a 21 or 22-year-old doing something that you would think you need 5+ years experience to do, and it'll do it all day, every day very well. Training themselves. If you've got the right culture, a lot of people struggle with training their people and the cost of training. I don't spend a dime on training. There's loads of stuff out there. Everything I've learned is self-taught. I've never been to a training course in my life. If you have the right culture where these people are very motivated, they just go and educate themselves. I don't even know what the hell my team is doing, but every week they're on half a dozen webinars, reading a book, reading that. Their skill set grows exponentially. And this is a cultural thing. This is something that you should achieve as a leader. Stop treating people like tick boxes, like they have skills A, B, C. Start treating them like human beings with phenomenal culture. If you push that drive, that ambition, that curiosity, you will get phenomenal stuff out of your people. Experience versus indoctrination. Sometimes you want experience, but be very careful because it tends to come with a lot of indoctrination. And this is back to my analogy of, if I get a 10-year CISSP, he's going to go fix cars in the parking lot. Or if I get a young kid who doesn't have the experience, he's going to look at things in a much more common sense way. So don't overvalue experience. And the whole thing with experience being measured by a unit of time is ridiculous. There was actually the creator of Fast API. He posted something on LinkedIn a couple of days ago. So he saw a job ad wanting 4+ years of experience in Fast API. It's like, too bad I can't apply for this job because I only invented the thing a year and a half ago. And we see that a lot. One thing I like to do is tailor to people, not roles. I have a vague idea of what I need. I've got 100 different things that need doing. If I find someone who can do 17 things, does it matter which 17 things? Why would I limit my options? Why don't I find great motivated people that want to do the job and then create the job role for them? And I usually have like a vague idea of what I want. I don't specify anything. Meet a candidate, figure out what they could be doing, create a job spec for them, and then ram them through HR. Make HR think that this is all traditional. The other thing is evolving functions. Like I was saying, like lose the job spec. These guys are, and I don't have any girls sadly, they are constantly learning so quickly that one week someone doesn't know a thing about Azure, a month later he's like an Azure ninja. Well, you're now in charge of this in Azure. There's no reason to not keep evolving, and they want to do these things, right? And again, I don't do interviews. I'm about to hire someone. I don't think there's going to be an interview. I'm going to ask, like, look, I need you to do this and this and this. Are you confident you can do that? It's like, I'm going to need you to be up to speed on these platforms. I'm going to need you to know Palo Alto, Cisco, Fortinet, and this other thing, maybe Forescout, in 4 weeks' time. Can you do that? If the answer is yes, he's hired. That's all I care about. And I've got a phenomenally productive team. I've got a team that's on something like 40% below market rate. And yet we are doing with half the headcount, twice the workload of our peers. And people tell me about, well, what about retention? Because you're paying them so little. Like, they're not there for the money. They're there because they're valued and they're trusted. They enjoy the fact that they're working at a senior level. They're willing to take less money because they're doing more work and they're feeling more fulfilled. Get your head around that one. So some proactive security examples just from what we're doing. So we've got about 30,000 users. We've got students, we've got academia who are, some are great, some are not so great. We've got lots of R&D, got lots of industry collaboration. We've got massively divergent requirements. So we've got one InfoSec head. I handle the politics, the strategy. I create the process frameworks. I've got 3 people. I've got one, he's basically a sock on 2 legs, handles all the incidents. And one thing, he's a cheeky bugger, but that means he does not mind going toe-to-toe or face-to-face. I mean, there are people in the organization that I avoid. He's not afraid of them. He'll go right up to them and argue and make cases and get stuff done. And that's phenomenal. I've got another guy his sole job is not even security. It's simply discovering the business. It's going out, being my right-hand guy to discover the business, discover what's going on to make sure that we're covering everything. And then I've got one other person whose job is infrastructure. Make sure we know everything there is to do about the infrastructure. Check what are our virtual environments like, what are our cloud environments like, what's our network infrastructure like. Spend all your time logging into network devices, getting the configurations, make sure things are feeding into SIEM, make sure everything is done. And we have about 30 different processes, and we document everything they do in those processes, and we schedule them, and we make sure that this is done sustainably. Our budget is ridiculous compared to our tiers. If I include salaries, we're not even spending 1/5 of what equivalent organizations are spending. We address root causes. We really heavily focus on addressing root causes, and that's why we can get away with a SOC team of 1 person who's not even doing that full time, because we address, every time we see an issue, we go after its root cause. If we see forwarding rules being created, why is that happening? And you end up finding, well, we have an Active Directory misconfiguration, and we're going to fix that. And then that forwarding incident doesn't happen again. Same thing with provisioning. Same thing with we had an incident with MFA, and I was like, well, our MFA is funny. It turned out to be how we build our desktop images. So our SOC analysts started going with the desktop team and rebuilding desktop images. That's the kind of stuff we do. We go after the root causes, and we do it quite merciless about it. And the interesting thing is, so we had our kind of management reviews of all our staff, and the head of our Media City organization, she actually said the easiest to deal with and most responsive team in the entire digital IT organization was the security team, and most security teams are the most hated. I thought that was great. So I want to talk about resilience just before I go, because again, resilience is what it should be about. We focus a lot on detection and response, but resilience. So I can remember being like a teenage hacker, and I had my Linux system, and I installed it off a CD, and then I would patch it, and I would harden it, and I would remove the unnecessary services, and then with a dial-up connection, I would go on Internet Relay Chat, no firewall, directly addressable IP address, and you just go on these chat rooms and antagonize dozens and dozens of hackers to hack you, and they couldn't do it simply because your system was locked down. To me, that should be resilience. We've gone this reactive thinking with resilience means how fast I can get back up. To me, it's like if I drive a tank, I simply don't care about who's throwing rocks at me. So threat intelligence and all this other stuff, except for insider threats and that kind of stuff, where it's operating within the bounds of access controls and that kind of stuff, it's irrelevant because it's simply not going to hurt me. I don't need to care about where the attack is coming from. I don't need to worry about it. It just doesn't impact me. And that's far, far more important, and it's far more cost effective than doing it. And that should be what I call first order resistance. Yes, you need detection and response, but that's secondary. And once you realize just how much more return on investment and how much more assurance per dollar or per pound you get by actually just building things properly instead of, quote, doing security, it really shifts your priorities. And that's about it. So one thing I want to say is a lot of us in information security get very, very frustrated. So I really want to encourage people to think strategically, set a goal long term. And the way I like to do it, and I hope this helps other people because it's really helped me, is if I go into an organization, I imagine an end state where, okay, I want us to be a certain way with a certain level of assurance. And that's my goal for 3, 4, 5 years from now. I don't know the roads to get to that point. And when I get a no, or when I get a point of resistance, instead of bashing my head against it, I actually see it as a positive because, this has now directed me. I need to get through or around this. So this is my first obstacle. This is my first challenge. And then you start working that way. And every time you meet that resistance, there's a reason that resistance is there. Quite often, more than not, it's organizational or cultural or political. And you need to work your way around that. And it's not always going to be a technical solution. It's not going to be an architectural solution. It's not going to be, sometimes it's just politics. Sometimes someone just doesn't like you and you have to figure out a way around that. And that's it. Personally, in the past, I've been very, very frustrated because a lot of people don't necessarily want to do this proactive change. I'm sure a lot of them, you are thinking as you're listening to this that, oh, this is quite a different idea. I don't know about this. Obviously, most companies do not hire for this, but I've been quite fortunate in having a very good speaking career that's kind of kicked off last year, as well as doing training and now writing books. And I'm glad to see how receptive others are and how they're applying it. So I really want to encourage everyone to, take this stuff in, reach your own conclusions by all means. Don't follow everything I say because I can't always be right. And just go out and drive that change and do amazing things. Because by people kind of listening to this, and the most I can hope for is to encourage thinking. If you guys can go out and have some new ideas and go do some amazing stuff, that would make me very, very happy. I just want to thank everyone for listening. Please don't hesitate to get in touch. I'm on LinkedIn, Greg Van der Gaast. I really like to connect with everyone. And if you'd like to hear more of such ramblings, you can check out my book, Rethinking InfoSec, on Amazon. Thank you very much. I'll give it back to Susanna.
Oh, thank you so much, Greg. That was absolutely amazing. We do have 3 questions so far. I believe that there will be more questions from the participants coming to the Q&A. I would just want to encourage everybody who would like to talk that you can put the comment in the Q&A. I'm also happy to unmute you if you want to have a quick discussion with Greg. So if you are happy, Greg, can we start with the first question?
Yes, please don't be me.
Okay, So fascinating stuff, also extremely frustrating that the same old issues causing such waste of finite resources. But my question, what are your thoughts on small businesses and what actions they should be taking, and whether you think cybersecure is a useful measure standard? So just break it down to you. What are your thoughts on small businesses and what actions should they be taking? And the
I'm
second question, yeah, go
maybe
ahead.
it's because I'm UK based, but I'm not cyber essentials. I'm not familiar with cyber secure. I'm googling.
I don't know, Hillary. If you would like just to drop a message, because I asked Hillary, she doesn't have a microphone. So if you just wanted to just comment on that, what do you mean by the cyber secure?
I mean,
Cyber
I do
essentials.
agree.
Okay, cyber
Yeah,
essentials it is. Sorry.
yeah. I think it's a good. I think cyber essentials is like most places. It's like most of these frameworks. It's all in how you implement it. And I already, it's funny. The commercial pressures are quite interesting because immediately you see a lot of companies who are like, "Oh, we'll get you certified. We'll get you certified." They de-scope stuff and they do the absolute minimum. And you have the certification, so now you can do business because you need it for business reasons. And unfortunately, that's the reality behind a lot of things of these standards. As soon as they're out there, people are trying to circumvent them to get the badge. One of the things I do like about cyber essentials, I'm going to say cyber secure now, cyber essentials plus in particular, because it is actually audited, by a third party, is, for example, the patching standards. It's one of, ISO doesn't tell you have to patch within 14 days, whereas cyber essentials does. And that's a little bit more pragmatic. So that's actually one of the things I like about cyber essentials. It is definitely a challenge for small businesses to have, and I think that's like an age-old story. It's an age-old problem. Small businesses where you cannot set up that internal security organization. But there are more and more kind of virtual CISO services. Not all of them are quite good, but it's definitely a lot better than it used to be. There's more and more options, but all I'm going to say is for small businesses, like really basic hygiene, like passwords, patching. Your network doesn't have to be complicated, but just like make sure it's thought out. If you have to hire a network consultant, a student for a day to set it up, do that. Change your router passwords, patch your systems. You're probably fine most of the cases, and the awareness piece is important. And I'm glad to say there's a lot more. The NCSC is doing a pretty good job educating people as well with that stuff. It's difficult because you don't have a full-fledged security organization, but it's getting better.
Thank you for that. Hopefully we did answer that fully, which I believe so. We do have here a question from Lindsay Johnson, and I'm reading it out. Whilst there is a lot of discussion about roles for young people, I'm nearly 60 and went to uni of Salford actually. What would you say that a nearly 60 years old who has all the qualities you describe in getting into IT, not found a way into SFAR? So that's one question, and then there is a follow-up about NHS.
I could see it being tricky. I could see there being some age discrimination, but if you have the qualities, send me an invitation on LinkedIn, and we will try to make you some noise, and hopefully someone will notice you. Please send me an invitation, and we'll see what we can do. Because at that point, well, first of all, I think far too many people discriminate because everyone's looking for tick boxes and certifications. So even a 25-year-old or a 30-year-old struggles because of the something I mentioned to you before. If you do an interview for like a group CISO role, you talk to this, a recruiter calls you, a day later you're talking to a CTO, 2 days later you're talking to the founder of the company, you go have a coffee, that's it. And yet we're subjecting people who want, an analyst role, a relatively junior role or a simple technical role, we're submitting them to, HR's ATS system that filters out all kinds of stuff, and then HR that doesn't understand what they want. Hiring managers are creating job specs that are ridiculous and don't get involved in the process at all, which I find is very weird. I mean, these are gonna be your people. Shouldn't you be more involved? And then like 5 rounds of interviews for like a junior role, like that's just absurd. But that seems to be kind of HR out of control, and a lot of hiring managers not, most HRs are out of control. But if as a good hiring manager, you should, find your candidate and just pull them through that. And a lot of hiring managers are not doing that, unfortunately. So that's a general problem. And if you're 60, you're probably going to face some age discrimination. I'm sorry to say. But send me an invite. I'll be happy to help any way I can.
Okay, and the second question on that is, what do you think about the NHS DSPT, which is the Data Security and Protection Toolkit?
I've not used it personally. I'm going to say it's similar to Cyber Essentials in my experience. I've had no exposure to it other than coming across as a requirement in a few things, but it was always have this or some other things. I think it's a good effort on part of the NHS. I'm not an expert. I know someone at like NHS Digital, and they're quite happy with it. So I think it's probably a lot better than nothing. I think if you compare it to the US's HIPAA, which is very heavy on compliance, I think it's probably far more, the NHS one's probably far more pragmatic.
All right, thank you so much. So next question. So refreshing to hear the push for fresh young minds rather than the push solely for qualifications. I've seen that with colleagues and myself. When you join a company, you see the ways that everything that can be done more efficient differently. Join InfoSec and humanities. Sorry, I just click over. Join InfoSec from humanities degree than working in the people team. So this is just a comment on the top of that. So I believe that it's alongside what you said, Greg.
Yeah. I mean, curiosity. If someone is curious and driven to learn, that's all you need. A lot of people say, oh, but you need an IT background, you need to have a system administrator or a networker. If you have a curiosity mindset instead, you're just going to learn everything you need to learn anyway. So it doesn't really matter. You know, as soon as it comes up, that's how I grew up. It's like I knew one thing, and then okay, I do like a basic piece of Linux, but okay, how does the web component work? How does the web server work? How does the email work? You know, how does the DNS server work? And you just learn all these pieces. As soon as something comes up, you absorb the information. As long as you're driven and curious, I don't see why people obsess over these static skill sets that are going to be out of date in a year anyway.
Absolutely. So next question is, what about the impact of the pandemic? This is going to make things even more random and unstructured for InfoSec teams. This is making work process less secure.
I've got mixed feelings about that, because I think in many ways, yes, it certainly adds some complexity. It's changed the situation, so a lot of rethinking is required. But it also raises a lot of awareness, which you can kind of leverage to. We've actually been able to use it to. We had a lot of fundamental problems that were there well before, but we could now illustrate much more clearly because of the problems they were causing. And that actually got us the traction to resolve some of them. So the perimeter's been dead for a while in many ways. So I find most of the stuff that has been COVID related is working from home securely. If you had really good working from home and remote working processes and policies and tooling in place already, you had no issues whatsoever. So now you have that push to do that. So you know, we've upped the ante on endpoint management and network access control that can validate configurations, because we have endpoints that are off the network for months now, and they need to come back, but we had no way of actually managing them while they were off the network. So what are we going to do? Like manually have a technician go and do stuff, or instruct people to do? No, we're going to set up a network access control gateway where they connect, they get the configuration validated, updated, configured the way they should be, and then they can access the network. So we can actually not just control access, but we can use that to make sure we can install anything we want or configure anything we want simply by asking people to connect to the network. So that's a capability that we're gaining out of COVID, which is going to help us be in a much better place than we were before COVID. So leverage every situation.
Excellent. So next question will be a bit tricky. So hopefully you're ready for that. So how can we educate companies and leaders to work in the way you do? Who should be doing that?
I'm trying. I think I've been surprised, I must say, because I swear, like 2 years ago, I thought like I'm the only person in the world that thinks this way. And the more I network, the more people kind of like, a lot of people listen to me. They weren't thinking that way, but they realize and they come around. And I'm surprised at how well that's come out. And especially since I published the book, I'm really surprised by the number of people that have come back to me. It's like, this makes so much sense, but I felt like that it should be this way, that there was a better way, or even that they used to think this way, but they'd been convinced to start doing it the same way as everybody else because they thought they were crazy. And it's like, it's so nice to actually have that validation that I wasn't actually crazy. I had it right, and I've been forced to do it wrong, and I'm going to go back to do it and get right again. I'm trying to do what I can, just in terms of this kind of thing. There's leadership courses by a few different providers. Putting the books out, putting the ideas out. It's got to catch on, and I think a big part of it is a lot of the IT leadership are not very good leaders. They're not focused on people, and they're not very good communicators. A lot of people in security think I'm crazy. No, he doesn't know what he's talking about. No, he doesn't even follow those standards. I know he doesn't use those metrics, this and that. But then I go and I talk to CFOs and COOs and CEOs, and they look at me like, you're the first security person in 10 years that makes sense to us. So who's wrong?
Absolutely. I think that's a great answer. So next question is, what is your view on mobilizing non-technical stakeholders with the issue of cybersecurity? So local department champions, people able to influence an organization or key staff behaviors.
Yes, do it. Yeah, I think you should engage absolutely everyone, because I think our reputation as information security people is shocking. I think over the years we've just been the security Gestapo. I specifically remember starting at the university and introducing myself as a head of information security. I think about 1 in 3 people physically recoiled when I introduced myself. That's how bad our reputation is. So I go out of my way every time someone contacts me and I don't know them, they're from a new department or some across campus or something, always go meet them for a cup of coffee, build up a personal relationship. And that kind of automatically, if you care about them, and this is another thing, because a lot of security people try to impose this on other departments. Hey, we want the marketing people to do security, but you have to show an interest in their work as well, because there tends to be reciprocation. So if you care about what they do and you try to enable what they do, then they'll care about what you want to do and they'll enable it as well. You have to communicate. We're here for you. We want to protect the business. So it's very important to give and not just expect everybody else to just do security as well, but absolutely engage fanatically, like I said. Yeah.
So following on that question, there is one from Benjamin. He guessed that the security rethinking would require that organizations being to review their risk appetites to provide for effective resilience. What are your advices to organizations in this respect?
Can you read that again? I didn't quite catch the beginning of it.
So security rethinking would require that organizations being to review. So I think it's about to review their risk appetite to provide for the effective resilience. So I'm guessing if I'm reading that correctly, Benjamin, and happy to put you on the microphone if you want to discuss it further, just to specify the question, that what are the advice to the organization in order to review their risk appetite to provide effective resilience?
Yeah. So I'm not a fan of the term risk appetite, to be honest, and this is another area where I'm weird. Like, why should you have any appetite for risk? And people tend to assume that security is linked to cost, but if you do it proactively, it actually costs less and less. So the more proactive you get, you actually get return on investment. So you want to be more secure, and it costs you less. Because a lot of the improvements that you do to asset management, to patching, to software deployment, system deployment, provisioning, all that stuff has real tangible benefits to IT capability and agility, and that has business benefits. It means you need fewer FTEs to get work done. So I don't like the whole assumption that security has a linear cost to it if you want more, because that's what's used in the risk appetite. And I find the risk appetite statement strange. So it's risk kind of tolerance. I just feel like you should do the best job you can. There's so much, and it's very, very much like metrics. I see some CISOs, they spend like 30-40% of the time working out reporting metrics. Well, it's like, well, my organization would be more secure if I spent that 30-40% of my time actually fixing stuff. So I think we need to kind of humanize that, for lack of a better term, and stop trying to make things look good and fit on paper. Because I think a lot of these things, they're very abstract concepts. They don't necessarily translate. I'm completely not answering your question, but I'm sorry, I just don't like that concept. Sorry, Benjamin.
But I think like it is, as you're saying, often people have a terms and risk appetite because a lot of people may not have, sorry for using the word, but a balls just to decide what feels right, like in the
Yeah,
guts, right?
yeah, it's a bit, and that's one of the things that's why I feel it's because of my kind of approach and management style to it. That's, relationships are doubly important for me because I will literally just do that. I want the CTO and the CFO to know I'm just going to do this thing, and then we're like, yeah, we trust them, and that's it. And that's the hurdle. It takes a year of building up to get to that point in terms of relationships, but it is achievable. And imagine investing a year of your time to then every year afterwards being able to do 10 times as much. So for me, it's worth the investment. But yeah, I think things like risk appetite and what is resilience and how do you measure it and against what? And you can't anticipate every scenario. So just do the best job you can. Yeah, that's all I got to say on that.
Yeah. We do have last two questions, so if you're okay with the time, we can just answer them.
I am, yeah. I'm actually the one that ran over, so please.
So, Greg, you mentioned that you hired a lot of people and you are paying them below the market rate. Whilst this is good for the business, isn't this taking advantage and immorally wrong?
It is a bit. You're not wrong. They're free to go. I don't keep them locked in the cage, and they choose to stay. And part of the reason is, well, first of all, for every person that I hired at half market salary, well, let me put it this way. I hire very, very junior resources, and I pay them, if I'm honest, I actually pay them salaries that are at or even slightly above what they would get hired for elsewhere if they would get hired elsewhere. So not only am I actually giving them an opportunity, because most people won't because they don't have 5 years of experience or some other ridiculous requirement, but it's more that they're underpaid for the job that they're doing. I mean, they're earning the same as they could make anywhere else, but I'll actually trust them to do much more senior work. And they appreciate that this leads to growth and it leads to satisfaction, because so many people, oh, I've got 5 years of experience now in cybersecurity. It's like, you spent 5 years in a corner working an Excel spreadsheet because that's all they would trust you to do. So that to me doesn't translate to experience. Whereas these guys, 1 year on the job, they've done absolutely everything, and they're excited and they're learning and they're growing. And yeah, sure enough, one of them got an offer for double his current salary, and he turned it down because he wanted to stay. So yeah, I don't want to exploit it. It's, to be honest, it's also the money I've been given, and I was given, I had, when I started, I was given 55K to hire one person. I'm like, we're going to need more than one person, so I'm going to hire 2 junior people and train them up. So I split that 55K between 2 people. And now I've been asked again, and it's like, it's a network engineering role. It should be 50, 60K. I'm like, no, give me 25K, and I will find someone who is willing to do it with the support and the mentoring, who could otherwise not make more than 20K, but will now have the opportunity to make 60K in 2-3 years time. So yeah, I don't feel too bad about it. We have a lot of fun. We have a lot of fun. And to be fair, like, my team often tells me, like, if you leave, we're all leaving with you. So they can't hate me that much.
Yeah, I think it's a great approach, and I fully agree with you. So the last question is more hypothetical. What are the main threats that you see that organizations should be focused on in the next 5 years?
They're the exact same as the last 20 years.
That's a brilliant finish.
I mean, everyone is getting compromised because of poor patching, poor asset management, no architectural standards. Okay, some of the stuff is look at BA and MageCart implemented some code through a third-party supplier, but you can scan your code base that's running on your web server. You would have noticed that there was a script there parsing credit cards. It's not terribly sophisticated. It was 20 lines of code that you would have spotted. Even most vulnerability scanners, you point them at your web server, they would have caught that. So they didn't catch it. Monzo called them up because, like, by the way, a lot of our customers are getting their credit cards stolen. And the thing they have in common is they all use your site. So a lot of this stuff is not sophisticated. You know, every time I see, oh, sophisticated, I forget what the exact term, like highly sophisticated attack, whatever, in the club CISO chat, we immediately start betting 20 quid that it's going to be SQL injection. It's all just the same stuff. It's about doing it holistically and getting into all the cracks and not falling into that trap of having silos and losing visibility. That's by far the most important thing.
Oh, thank you so much, Greg. It has been so insightful. So just before we do and stop recording and everything, there is a Fabrizio Di Carlo. He's saying, "Hi, Greg. I hope you are doing better these days. Referring to your break you posted on LinkedIn. Looking forward to your next book." Hillary is thanking you. Sorry.
No, I know Fabrizio from LinkedIn. Yes. Thanks, man.
Excellent. Hillary Hinks is saying that it was great and looking forward the recording that she can listen to it again. And we had on the chat, we also had the lady from the NHS. Let me just get the chat up open. Lindsay Johansson, that she is really pleased with the event and that she enjoyed that it was a marvelous evening and best webinar she has attended. So great stuff. So thank you so much, Greg, and thank you everybody.